time to shift gears. This is the Man Shift Guide.
Welcome back to the Man Shift Guide, and this is part two of the story where we're talking to Peter. And if you are just getting caught up to what we're going through or where Peter was going through, he talked about having been deaf up until the age of 11, and then he regained his hearing through having numerous of surgeries, plus learning how to play the drums. And then we talked about how um, since that point he was playing in bars at 13 and starting to be making music his life, and then discovering the underbelly, if you will, of music, which is, the drugs, because that's there, and alcohol. And last time we ended, we were talking about how music was his purpose, but there's still thing that felt like was missing, and then we used um substances to kind of fill up as a band-aid to fill that in. And I think we'll continue from there.
All
um
right.
Substances started at an early age, I'm assuming, or
Yeah.
did it take time to?
No, it started at an early age. I was at like 12, 13. I was sneaking my father's cigarettes, right? So
Okay.
my dad used to smoke Newports, and I would sneak them from him, and I would, sneak around my house and I'd smoke a cigarette. And, I would get like a buzz off the cigarette, and, it would make me not, so depressed. I would actually like want to go smoke a cigarette so that I would feel different, looking back at it now, that's what I've gotten from it. At the
Mhm.
time, I was, oh, I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing, and there was an excitement in that, because you were doing something that you could get caught for and see if you could get away with it. Um, but it started with the cigarettes, and then 13 years old, I was smoking weed heavily. I mean, I was smoking all the time. I would skip school to smoke weed. I got busted with like a pound of weed on me when I was like 15, and I'm very lucky I didn't go to jail. But my mother, she knew the cops in the small village that I was from, and um, they took it easy on me, I guess. And then, after that, I started taking, mushrooms, hallucinogenics. I also, started drinking here and there. The drinking wasn't huge until I became like of the age to drink. Then around like 2021, I started drinking pretty heavily, a lot. And I did that for, I don't know, almost 20 years. I'm 3 years now sober. And that's, been a huge, grace in my life. It's been like the number one thing I think I could have done to change my life and what I could do to change my life. Like when you look at yourself in the mirror and you get to the point where you're like, why are you doing this every day? Why do you have to have a beer to feel relaxed? Those kind of things. Why are you spending so much money on beer? You know, when you get to that point to where you start hating yourself for that, and then you make a choice to either drink more to cover up that feeling or you stop. you know a lot of people can do that. In my case, that wasn't the case. I was very heavily addicted to marijuana and alcohol. And alcohol I drank every single day, all the time. Extreme alcoholic. I would even like hide it, from people, you know and until I asked God to take it from me. Again, Jesus comes in and changes my life, you know. And this was before I had that experience with him. That I was so down that I couldn't quit on my own. I was so mad at myself. So I called out and I said, "Hey, take it from me, take it from me, take it from me." And I remember my mom used to tell me, God will take the things you don't want. You just got to give it to him. And for some reason in this period of time, that's all I constantly thought about. I think it was because my mom was sick, and she was bedridden for the last 11, 12 years of her life. She was bedridden. And so that was hard going and seeing her and stuff. But I would always like remember those kind of things she would tell me when I would get like upset and sad, which was all the time then, So it was always a constant reminder of, maybe you can't do it on your own. So I gave it, I gave it to Jesus. And next morning, woke up, nothing, no urge, no nothing. And I haven't drank since. Um, I didn't have to go through any withdrawals. I didn't go through anything that people go through because, I've been in 6 rehabs. So I've been bunked with people that were detoxing from alcohol, and they hallucinate and have seizures. And it's crazy to see that, and that was one of my biggest fears, because I was such an alcoholic. I was going to have a seizure, because I have epilepsy. Something was going to happen to me, but nothing that I actually got over it overnight. So did my wife. My wife was a heavy drinker too. We drank together, and I prayed for her too, and she got over it too. We both have been sober since that day. Um, Months later, after we were deep into our sobriety, I finally told her that. I finally told her, I asked God to take this from us. And she looked at me, smiled, and said, I believe it. Because she didn't go through any of the withdrawals either. She didn't go through I need to have alcohol to feel relaxed. I need to have this. I need to have it because of this. None of that, So again, Jesus came into my life and changed it. You know what I mean? Because I asked him to. I paid attention to him. I gave him acknowledgement. He's always there, but if you're not paying attention to him, you're not speaking with him, you're not having a relationship with him, he chooses not to do, not to intervene, because he loves you so much that he gives you a choice, right? So, as humans, we always choose the other way, as opposed to, the way that we need. We always make it harder for ourselves. We were talking about this earlier. We always seem to make our lives harder than it really actually has to be. Then, fast forward a little bit, I was 21 and I had my first kid. And I didn't see him a lot. His mother took off with him. And I had to fight many, many, many court battles just to see him as little a time as I saw him. He's grown up now. He's 21. He lives in right near Canada. I've seen him recently. He had a daughter, so I'm a grandfather now. But because of that, and because of that distance there, we don't talk as much as we should, and that creates something. But that's all in God's plan too. You have to. And the thing is that he became very religious as well. Caleb is his name. He became very much into Jesus, and that's good. That's one of the best things that I could have hoped for him, because he went through a lot of bad stuff. You know what I mean? Just stuff that kind of affected him, in whatever ways it did. But either way, again, God having a plan, there's always a plan for everything. So then, I had my second son, Jasper. Then I had a daughter, Lotus, and another son, Nico. And I was always constantly like really just griping over the whole, like, I didn't ask them to be here. What am I doing for them? They would be better without me, because I'm always depressed. I'm always sitting in the dark. I'm always just crying all the time because I hated myself so much, And that was really my depression. That's what it was. It was just me hating myself. I didn't hate the world. I didn't hate people. I love people. I always loved people. I hated myself. I hated being alive. I hated breathing. I felt like I was a waste or a burden to people, even though I wasn't, I mean, my mother loved me very much. My father loves me very much. My brother loves me a ton. And I have friends that all care about me, so in that way, one would say they're lucky. But again, I say it's God's plan. because it all has to be that way, and once you realize that and you give your life to God, you give your life to Jesus, particularly is what I did. I gave my life to Jesus himself, because you can't get to God without Jesus, right? Or so it says. And so once I did that, my life completely changed. But it wasn't before I got out on that belt. He came in and he did things because I asked him to, right? I asked him to intervene in my life because I couldn't do it myself. And I knew that I needed to do it, because it was going to lead to a healthier, more love-filled life, as opposed to the negative, depressive one that I had and more or less created for myself too, because I hated myself so much. And that affects everybody. Everybody in your family, it affects everybody. When you hate yourself that much, it affects everybody. And I just didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to hurt everybody because I hurt so much for myself. You know. But before that moment, that didn't exist. It was horrible. And then after that moment that I called out to him, my life instantly changed. It instantly changed in a second. And since then, it's been nothing but the love and the gratefulness that I have for the life that I have, you know, and for my kids. I don't see myself as a burden to them anymore, because I can see how much they care about me. I know how much my kids love me now. There's not a veil there that's stopping me from seeing what is right in front of my face. And that's the love that he gave me. That's what Jesus did for me. He changed my life. He showed me what real love was, not the word, not the emotion, but what it really was inside. And once that happens, the world changes. You see the world differently, or at least that's what happened to me. I stopped doing certain things. I didn't want to be around certain things. You know what I mean? And it's all been a godsend. Like, I could have just jumped, and I still once in a great while think about it. Like, right now, I'm thinking about it. I could have jumped, but it would have traumatized my family, even though they knew. And I would walk around, back when I was in those hazes, and I would say, I'm gonna kill myself. I know I'm gonna kill myself. Like, that's how my life is supposed to end. Like, this is what I was meant for, because I just couldn't get it out. I couldn't get the depression out. It was crippling. I couldn't even get out of bed sometimes. It was just, and I mean, like, sometimes I use as a very loose term, you know, but he changed my life. He changed my life completely, and I'm so grateful for that. And that there is nothing else that in my life that compares spiritually than that. It, I still feel what it is. I still feel that turning in my chest. I still feel that I don't have to sit there and be like, I hate myself. I hate myself so much, because I just don't anymore, because I felt the love of Jesus. And so after that moment, I got this story in my head and I wrote The Endless Fall. And since then, Barnes and Nobles have picked it up. I've been on numerous stations, numerous appearances telling my story. I'm now making a television show that just got picked up by a streaming platform, and it's not even filmed yet. I've got an agent from Warner Brothers. Like, my whole life changed in less than a year. You know, the anniversary for The Endless Fall is coming up in June, so it hasn't even been a year since I released it, and already all these doors have opened, all these pathways have opened, and I've gotten the motivation to actually write these screenplays and write these books. I'm now on my fourth novel, that's coming out June 10th, and that's exclusively for Barnes and Noble. And all of these things happen because of God, because of Jesus. This is what happened. He set out a path for me to walk and to see what would happen, and I'm just extremely grateful. And without him, none of this would have been possible. None of it. I would have still been depressed. I probably would have killed myself, I think, eventually, having those thoughts all the time. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Yeah.
For the first time that I have had a guest to make me emotional, like feeling like, I've been there. I've been to the point where I felt like maybe me not being around would be better for my family. Like I felt that in my core. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that many other people have felt that at one point and maybe is experiencing that right now. And I do have one more question for you,
Yeah.
and we are again running out of time. So I think that we're going to push this to a episode number 3 because I
Awesome.
think that last question that I have for you is probably going to be as impactful as the rest of the story that you've been telling here. So um in the meantime, again, I will put the documentary, links to his book, and anything else in the description of this one, and we will see you on the next one.